MicroStrategy holding all this Bitcoin, does it ever make you at all nervous?
No, actually, it gives me great comfort. I don't really think we could do anything better to position our company in an inflationary environment than to convert our balance sheet to Bitcoin, because we basically built a balance sheet on a non-sovereign store of value that's not a currency derivative. 2 years ago, we were sitting on a bunch of cash, and that cash was losing about 10% of its purchasing power a year. And then when COVID struck and the Fed took a more accommodative monetary policy, that cash started losing 25% of its purchasing power a year. So my anxiety was maximized around April, May of 2020 when we had the K-shaped recovery, and I realized that cash is trash, everything's about to get much more expensive, and we needed a strategy. So we adopted a Bitcoin strategy. It's driven up our stock by a factor of 5. In my opinion, it saved the company from a not very pleasant fate. So I'm totally pleased with where we are today.
Just Bitcoin? None of those other thousands of cryptocurrencies?
Look, Bitcoin is digital property. It's universally acknowledged as common property because it had a fair distribution, no ICO, no management team. Satoshi disappeared. It's pari passu to a commodity, to land, to gold. And it's pretty important that it be deemed property. The rest of the cryptos could be securities. There's just a lot of regulatory overhang and question about whether they're securities or not. And I think that the great innovation is the creation of common property in cyberspace. It took us 13 years to get to the point where that's universally acknowledged. So that makes Bitcoin the safe haven for a public investor or a public company. Everything else feels more like either venture capital or speculation.
Now, you personally are, and the internet can correct me if I'm wrong, the longest running software CEO in history. You founded it in 1989 when you were 24 years old. What has this 32-year ride been like?
I learned a lot of humility. We came public in 1998, so now I've been a public company CEO for many, many, many quarters. I lived to see 99% of my peers exit the business. So I didn't really understand this at the time, but now as I look back, what I realize is all my peers exited the business because they're forced to grow their top line and their cash flows at a frenetic rate, and eventually they get undone by dilutive acquisitions, and then they have to sell themselves. MicroStrategy, we've been very fortunate. We've been focused. We soldiered on. And we've always had a passion to make the best software we could. And as our competitors disappeared, we found opportunities.
You grew up as an Air Force brat, traveling around the world. What kind of kid were you? Tell us about your upbringing, a young teenage Michael.
I read a lot of science fiction. I read pretty much every science fiction book by all the great science fiction writers, probably 2 or 3 times. I played Dungeons and Dragons. Before we actually had these Wizards, Warcraft, and other games on computers, we actually had to draw out the dragons, and we had to write down what's in the dungeon, and we had to construct our entire virtual world. So I think before computers, we used our imaginations to create simulations and to exercise probability and distribution. And it taught me a lot about practical statistics. My background led me eventually to trip over a book by Robert Heinlein called Have Spacesuit Will Travel, where the protagonist gallivants across the universe, saves the human race from bug-eyed monsters, and for his services to humanity gets a full tuition scholarship to MIT. And it's stuck in my head that MIT was probably a good place to go if you believed in engineering and making the world a better place.
You studied aeronautics, I believe, and then you pivoted to tech and founded MicroStrategy with one of your MIT fraternity brothers. And the software basically provides business intelligence, helps companies make sense of their data so that, for example, McDonald's could learn how many Big Macs it might sell in a given night in Chicago. Is that right?
Yeah, the idea is to extract all of the data at an atomic level, like every item sold every hour of the day in every store in the world for every McDonald's. What we discovered is the world's full of companies that have billions of lines of data, and they're trying to make sense of them, and they had to extract those sophisticated sets of data, compare them to each other in order to make a decision about a marketing campaign or a product launch, or even something as simple as how many items should I have on each store shelf? And it's worth a lot of money to get it right. And if you get it wrong, you find out that you don't have the products you need when people want to buy those things, and it costs you a lot of money. So we were in the right place at the right time there.
You've witnessed some serious roller coasters. You saw the dot-com bubble blow up and burst before your eyes. What lessons have you taken away from that informs your strategy today?
I would boil it down to this stoic observation, right? You can acquire a thing, but can you maintain the thing? And if you can maintain the thing, can you enjoy the thing? And what I discovered is a lot of people acquire things they can't maintain, and a lot of people can maintain things, but they can't ever enjoy. And so you want to boil it down to another metaphor. It's laser focus. You have to figure out what you are the best in the world at and what you can continue to be the best at the world at in the face of unrelenting, exponentially increasing competition. And once you figure out what that is, focus on it with all of your resolve. And if you do that, then you can stay in business. That's the first thing I learned. That's why I have laser eyes on Twitter. The whole point of laser eyes is you've got a solution, focus on the solution. Don't get distracted by all of your good ideas and allow it to dilute your focus on your great idea.
About this possible winter, are you really not feeling the cold?
If you wouldn't hold it for 10 years, you shouldn't hold it for 10 minutes.
The decision to bet on Bitcoin to acquire the thing, would you say that's your Phoenix moment?
I would say it probably is. I never said it or thought about it like that, but I feel like most of my life was leading up to this point, and I understood the power of dominant digital networks like Google and Facebook and Amazon and Apple because I rode that for a decade. I also understood the detriment of not being that dominant network. MicroStrategy competes against Microsoft. We compete against companies 100 times as big as us. When we got to 2020, what I saw was the winning strategy is digital transformation if you have the dominant network. The losing strategy is to continue to work harder and exponentially harder for a currency growing exponentially weaker. And I had a sense of the consequences if we did nothing because I had seen the demise of 99% of my competitors, and I could see where we were headed if we stuck with the status quo. We would have to either adopt a Bitcoin strategy or sell the company, and we elected to pursue Bitcoin.
What was the reaction from investors, from other CEOs, CFOs, when you put Bitcoin on your balance sheet in such a big way, compared to the way they're reacting now?
Many people didn't really understand Bitcoin very well. They haven't taken the time to focus on it. Even today, I would say that 98% of the population hasn't spent 10 hours thinking hard about Bitcoin. So in the year 2020, I think most people were just ignoring it. It wasn't really registering with them, maybe 1%. I think that when we talked to our investors, what was interesting is privately, most investors were aware of Bitcoin and they thought it was a good idea. Publicly, their institutions that they're part of have a 3 to 5 year time lag from the point at which they can adopt new ideas.
So about this possible winter, are you really not feeling the cold?
Look, if you're going to invest in Bitcoin, a short time horizon is 4 years, a mid-time horizon is 10 years. The right time horizon is forever. Warren Buffett said, if you wouldn't hold it for 10 years, you shouldn't hold it for 10 minutes. So if you look at the course of 4 years, no one's ever lost money over 4 years holding Bitcoin. And if you look at, our experience, we started buying it at $10,000 and now it's up by a factor of 4. So given the right time horizon, you're fine. So it's a blessing and a curse. The blessing is it makes it the most exciting, interesting thing in the financial universe everywhere in the world. And the curse is it can induce anxiety for people that have a short attention span or are focused on a narrow time horizon.
What do you think then is behind this early 2022 crash?
I think that there's a lot of dynamics here. If you look at the entire crypto ecosystem, you have a set of regulatory uncertainty, especially regulatory uncertainty around stable coins and crypto tokens and whether or not they're securities. And that creates a little bit of anxiety. You have a lot of leverage offshore. Right? You have a lot of crypto exchanges that can trade with up to 20x leverage. And those crypto exchanges have many, many tokens that are cross-collateralized. And between them and the DeFi exchanges, you can get much higher than 20x leverage. So that's a second source of volatility. The crypto markets are almost designed to encourage volatility. And that creates kind of a love-hate relationship between the crypto ecosystem and the Bitcoin hodlers. The Bitcoin hodlers are holding for, a decade, and sometimes for 100 years and sometimes for 1,000 years. And yet you've got fast money hedge funds that have a tax incentive, a huge amount of leverage, and massive volatility. But you have two totally different investment mentalities here. And when they come together, the result is you've got, in my opinion, the world's least risky asset to hold over the next century called Bitcoin. And you've got the world's most volatile, fast money market, called crypto. And they're both joined at the hip, for better or for worse, in the year 2022.